We'll now move along to a control that's fairly similar to a UI table view. We're going to take a look at the UI collection view. And they're similar in that we'll be working with data sources and delegates that will look really familiar to you. The difference is that the collection view is more flexible in the layouts that you can create. The most obvious is that we can create a grid, and that's what we're going to do in this lesson. So I've got a collection view that I've added to the form, and I've done a few things, but let me add a collection view just raw so you get to see what it looks like for starters. So here it is, but there's a little square in the top left, and that's a collection view cell. And that's basically a template for the rest of the collection view. I'm going to delete this one. I just wanted to show you that default, and I'll stretch the one I have out a bit. So I have my collection view cell, and I've given it the identifier CV cell. Like we talked about with the table view, this identifier is important. In that cell, I've added a standard label control. And I've also done one other important thing. I've set its tag property, and I've set it to 1. And I'm going to be using that tag property in the code. On the collection view, I did set some attributes for the cells. I changed the cell size width to 100 and the height to 75. And you, of course, can change it to whatever you want. By default, it comes as 50 by 50. And I created a referencing outlet for the collection view. So that's the basic storyboard work. I also, by the way, changed the tint on the table cell. In the code, it'll look pretty familiar to you. We have a UI collection view data source, which is really similar to a UI table view data source. And we have a UI collection view delegate. Again, very similar to a UI table view delegate. I have my UI collection view outlet. And I have a variable for my cell ID. If you remember, it was called CV cell. I set my collection view delegate and my collection view data source to this view controller. And I have a function called number of sections in collection view, which, as you might guess, is really similar to number of sections in table view. And I'm just going to return 1. We'll only have one section. But we can do multiple sections, and we can do headers and footers on those sections as well. And then we have, on the collection view, the number of items in a section. And I'm going to return 100. And this is very similar to the table view, basically asking how many rows are in a section, except in a collection view, because I can have different kinds of layouts, it asks the number of items in a section. And then I have cell for item at index path. And this is really similar to the UI table view. And here's a little Objective-C that we don't really need. So we're going to get our cell, and we're going to go to the collection view and dequeue the reusable cell with reuse identifier, and that's cell ID CV cell. And we'll do that for this particular index path that's passed in as a parameter. Exactly the same as the UI table view. Here's where it gets a little bit different. I'm going to get something I'm call a cell title, and I'm going to go into the cell and get the view with the tag equal to 1. I'm going to cast it as a UI label. So what I got out of the DQ reusable cell is actually that cell in the storyboard that I'm calling CV cell. Inside that CV cell, I have this label, and that's what I want to get next. So that's a view with inside the cell. So I look at the cell, and I ask for the view with tag 1. And that's because I set the tag property on that UI label to 1. So that's going to be my cell title label. And then I'm going to set the label's text just as I normally would, using a string format and just calling out the row number. And I return that cell. And I can do whatever I want to with the cell here. I could actually even add controls to it and other views to it. I could change colors. I could change fonts. I can do whatever I want to. But let's take a look at what we've done so far. You can see I have multiple cells. And if I keep on scrolling down, there'll be exactly 100 of them. And I have the background colors and the appropriate label. You can see I also have a little bit of padding, and that's an attribute in there as well. So that's what a collection view looks like. And as you can see, the methods we are working with are really similar to UI table view. That goes further with other methods, for instance, where we want to determine if a user clicked a particular cell or not. We can use basically the same call that we used on UI table view. So it's very similar, but it's a bit more flexible in that we can get other layouts.